We all know that in life, success is based on relationships. But how many of us do that well? So what I thought I would do today is give you 3 very basic suggestions on how you can meet people. And not about transactional relationships, but about transformational relationships. The first lesson I want to share is this. How many of you are familiar with Sequoia Capital and Don Valentine? Don Valentine is considered the grandfather of Silicon Valley in San Francisco. He's invested in multiple companies, whether it's Atari, Apple, Google. And when I watched one of his presentations one time, he said that he really laments that a lot of startups don't share their story well. They talk about the facts and figures, they talk about how scalable it is, but they don't share their story well. And stories, by the way, mind you, from empirical evidence, is 22 times more memorable than facts. Stories are 22 times more memorable than facts. When we look at the stories that have inspired us, Bill Gates founded Microsoft almost over 40 years ago. And his vision at the time was to have a computer on every desk in every home. Now it seems kind of obvious now that we live in 2016, but 40 plus years ago, for a guy to say, we're going to have a computer on every desk in every home, pretty revolutionary, right? You have someone like Howard Schultz. Anybody a fan of Starbucks? His vision and dream and story was that he was inspired by going to Italy, and when he sat along the piazzas in Italy, sipping his cappuccino, he had this amazing sense of liberty and freedom. And so when he came back to the States, he wanted to create and recreate that experience at Starbucks here. Again, story. Lastly, Steve Jobs. If anyone's ever read the book Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson, highly recommended. When Steve Jobs wanted to convince John Scully, an executive at Pepsi, he said, do you want to sell sugar water or do you want to change the world? Right? It's all about stories. So my story began as an entrepreneur when I was 7 years old in Woodside, Queens, selling portable handheld fans. And then I would rake leaves and shovel snow. And then when I was 12, my uncle hired me from his insurance company in Lower Manhattan. And I really started understanding how to be an entrepreneur at a 12-year-old, 7th grader age. And it was really cool because, on one side, I was teased for being really short. I was ridiculed because I talked too much, and they gave me this reading disability. But then on the other side, my uncle hired me at his insurance company at age 12. Bought my first stock when I was 15. Bought my first car when I was 19 based on my stock profits. And then when I got to my mid-20s, I started working at American Express in New York City at 40 Wall Street. But I didn't like this whole corporate American job. So I quit my day job, sold my apartment, left my family and friends behind, came out to California, and that was 16 years ago. And now 16 years later, I pretty much get hired and invited to speak all around the world. This is my 3rd book, and I also write books for other people. My point is, dreams are possible, hopes are possible, things are possible if you sacrifice. And I see so many startups that come through LA and the Bay Area and all around the world, and they talk about all these amazing figures, but again, what's your story, what's your vision, what's your passion, because that's what will be remembered in the long run. So the first thing is, share your story with a sense of clarity, share your story with a sense of passion, because that's what will hopefully impress upon someone so that when you do walk into a room, and you walk out of that room, that person will remember you, not just for your scalability, but for your personal and professional story. So step number 1, share your story, 22 times more memorable than facts. The second one is listening. How often do we actually listen well? I actually just flew in from Tel Aviv on Sunday, and Tel Aviv is a beautiful, phenomenal place. And the book I read was How Google Works by Eric Schmidt, who is the executive chairman of Google. He worked there from 2001 to 2011, and he built Google into a $50 billion plus company. And out of the 260 pages, 55,000 words, roughly, 11 words stood out most. And those words were, the most important skill that any business person can develop is, guess what he said? The most important skill that any business person can develop is, based on Eric Schmidt from Google, what do you think it is? Interviewing. We all know, oh yeah, it's so important, Chris, we gotta build a company, we have to find the right people. But he said the most important skill that any business person can learn and develop is interviewing, which is synonymous with listening. Asking those qualifying questions, asking what the person's about. So all these startups here Have you even talked to the investors on a more personal level as opposed to just say, yeah, how scalable it is? I remember one person talking about how he was a certain weight and then now he's more healthy, right? But it's about that personal story. And so in the Chinese language, the character for listen actually has 5 parts. On the left-hand side, it says to listen with the ears. But on the right-hand side, the 4 parts says on the top right, it has listen to you, which is listening to someone else, one-on-one. Right below that is listening with your eyes. Right below that is the character for 1, which is you're listening to someone with undivided attention, not looking at your smartphone, not looking at your computer, not going outside. It's about undivided attention. But the last and most important one is listening with your heart. That's the final character on the bottom left-hand side, or the right-hand side of the Chinese character for listen. So you have listening with your ears, obviously, listening with your eyes, most importantly with your heart. Now, that character literally symbolizes what Eric Schmidt said in one symbolic character. You want to do better in business? You want to find teammates, inspire investors, to get clients, to get your business partners all on one page? Make sure you have that story so you can listen not just with your eyes, your ears, but with your heart, because that's ultimately how you really inspire people. And you look at all the people in the past, like I said, whether it's Howard Schultz, or Steve Jobs, or Bill Gates, or now more recently with Elon Musk. I mean, that guy's like, I want to colonize Mars, right? I mean, he had that vision, though, when he was really young, when he was in college. But the point still is, the most important skill to learn as a business person is to learn how to interview. Ask those questions, listen intently, not just with the ears, but with the eyes and with your heart. The last lesson I want to share is having commonality. We live in a world, especially let's say today is Super Tuesday, and whether you're on one side or other side, it's really discouraging when you're looking at what they're saying to each other, right? But let's say I was just in Jerusalem and I saw the old city, and even in the old city, you have a Muslim quarter, a Jewish quarter, an Armenian quarter, and a Christian quarter. Now in math, when you're adding up fractions, you have fractions that have a common denominator, right? So it wasn't like a Jewish 1/2 or a Muslim 1/3 or an Armenian 1/8. It was quarters. So my point I'm getting at is, like, when you're meeting people, engage them with things that you're common with. So for instance, I was in Tel Aviv on I think it's called Dizengoff Road, and I was there by myself, and so there's another guy there. He's actually from America, and so if I focus on the differences, he's originally from St. Croix, and he's in tech, and I'm not, and he is a computer programmer, and he's a soccer player. But instead, if we focus on the commonality, our common denominators, the fact that he was there, he's American, we're both entrepreneurial, we both want to do good in the world, and so ultimately, those are the things that will allow us to have that glue to create relationships that will ultimately last into more transformational things as opposed to just transactional. So the 3 basic tips are, again, share your story with passion, share your story with clarity, share your story so that people actually understand who you are, so that when I talk about, let's say, when I was in 8th grade and I was 4'10", and I would get teased by all my classmates. And ultimately, back in the pre-Twitter days, they wouldn't even have Twitter handles. They would just tell you who they were. So my classmates in my 8th grade graduation would tell me, oh, Chris, you look like a dwarf, or you're like a pygmy, or you're like, don't worry, you'll grow one day, just be patient, take those vitamins. And when I share these personal stories with people, it's funny how I can talk about all the success I've had in publications and where I've spoken around the world, but what they remember when I leave the room is, Chris, this German guy named Klaus once said, I used to get teased because of my ears. Or another guy from Utah would tell me how he was short too. But the point I'm getting at is, like, if I didn't share these personal stories, people wouldn't really connect with me, and ultimately, those are the connections that you want to have with your investors and your employees and colleagues. To just summarize this whole thing, make sure you understand how to share your story with passion and enthusiasm. Make sure you listen, and the most important skill is interviewing. And lastly, try to find those commonalities in life. I want to share one final story, and again, if anyone wants this book, feel free to take one, as long as supplies last. It's 20 strategies in networking based in 100 pages. The last story I'm going to share is this. 3 blocks away, I met Elon Musk about 2 years ago. Elon Musk, as all of you know, he created 5 companies. He's most known for SolarCity, SpaceX, and Tesla. And when I walked up to him and said, hey, Elon, I really admire your success. Great speech at the World Affairs Council. He nods his head, all cool. He's a really big guy, he's like 6'2". And I said, I started a homeless youth program at the largest shelter in downtown LA. I'd love for you to inspire my students. Can I get your email? He gives me his email, and 2 months later, he comes down to the worst part of town to inspire homeless kids that most need his story. So my last story to you is this. I hope all of you do amazing in your business, make you millions and billions of dollars, but I also hope that you give back in whatever your communities are. Because if Elon Musk can spend that 1 hour at a homeless shelter helping these homeless kids out, I know all of us can. Because when it's all said and done, that program, when you think about downtown, I mean, there's literally, LA is considered the homeless capital of the country. And that area called Skid Row, for those of you who don't know LA, it's a 50-block radius in downtown LA. And in this shelter called the Union Rescue Mission, they have 800 people that live there a night, and 80 of those people are kids. And this little 8-year-old girl one time walked up to me about 5.5 years ago and said, do you want to play jump rope? And at that moment, I decided to start a program, a career and life skill program, to help teenagers that are at the shelter. And we've had over 200 speakers in this place from 24 countries, and Elon Musk is one of them. But my final note to you is this. I really hope you do well in business, but I also hope you really give back, even if it's in a very small amount of time, because when you think about it, we have 168 hours in a week. And if you were to devote 1 hour of your time to volunteer at a cause that you really believe in, whether in my case helping homeless kids, that's literally only 0.6% of your time. And when you factor in all of life, and you factor in your stories, I mean, how amazing would it be if you created an amazing company, let's say you're with Bill Gates. He was vilified and demonized years and years ago, and now he has the largest philanthropic institution in the world with his wealth. And so I leave you with that. Share your story, listen, interview, build that commonality, and hopefully you spend some time helping those that are less fortunate. Thank you so much.